Welcome to Sera, a podcast hosted by me, Sera and Lalonde. Join me as I go straight to the sources of my curiosity. Each episode, I get to discover or rediscover everyday educators as we discuss their passions and their projects. Listen in on our conversation and let our words spark imagination and inspiration. You're listening to episode 92 with Noa Daniel. Becoming the teacher I want to be is a process with no real arrival. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am sitting grinning ear to ear because I have Noa Daniel on my podcast, Sera, and I think, well, first of all, it's crazy because why has it taken almost 80 some episodes for you to be here, Noa? That's my first question. Unacceptable. And the second reason why I'm grinning ear to ear is because I don't think I've had a guest yet that has as much like energy and expertise and just like love and passion for education. And that is someone that I like look up to so much. So that would be just two really good reasons why I'm so pumped to have you on the show today. So
how am I going to live up to that, Sera?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know Noa, first of all, you should basically. Have you been living under a rock? You have your own podcast called the Personal Playlist Podcast that I was very honored to be on.
We had some
you
fun.
host. Yeah, it was fun. We listened to some Shania Twain, some Disney music. It was all good things. You also host On Ed Mentors, and you are very well known for your building outside the blocks approach, also known as your BOBs. However, one thing that I wasn't 100% sure of was, what is your teaching life like these days? What kind of context did you go into? Are you still teaching in intermediate?
So I am. I was really lucky. I left 23 years in private education and started at the board as a supply teacher. And that has been really interesting and wonderful. And last year I got a contract for 67%. So I teach up until 12:20, a wonderful grade 8 homeroom. So I get to immerse myself in the classroom. And then I spend the rest of the day doing a lot of different fun things, including working on Voice Ed Radio and building On Ed Mentors Connect. I love hosting On Ed Mentors. I was really reluctant when Derek kind of said, okay, you're doing this now. I said, okay, but I absolutely love going into a space and wondering what I could do with the people that are there for a panel on the show. And so every conference I go to, every educational interaction becomes a catalyst for thinking, how can I bring these voices onto Voice Ed, to the On Ed Mentors panel to share and unite and help people think about education through the lenses of these wonderful educators.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things participating in On Ed Mentors is that you never really know how the conversation is going to end up. I guess kind of like podcasts, right? Like there's no plan necessarily.
Well, even if there is a plan, and that was one of the great epiphanies of On Ed Mentors, is when I was invited onto the show, we were invited as panelists to mentor pre-service teachers. And there you are, and you were really a huge part of this. And we were listening to you and learning from you. And we had this sanity moment where we went, this just isn't about imparting knowledge and sharing expertise. This is about collaborating to learn from each other. And it was non-hierarchical and reciprocal. So then when I had the idea for building OEM Connect, I was like, we need to do this in a larger space, and we need to create a place for people at every stage of their teaching career to feel that they have something to offer. And for it not always to be, oh, well, you're a pre-service or a new teacher. Let me tell you how it is, because pre-service and new teachers have gifts and talents that need to be celebrated. So it's been wonderful knowing you, because you were a key part of us seeing this essential shift that's needed in the concept of mentorship, never mind what we offer through OEM Connect and the On Ed Mentor Show.
You say the word mentorship and I just like get ignited and just so inspired. It's something that, I don't know, I just love that word and everything that it means. And because kind of we open the doors to OEM Connect, I want to just kind of not dive too deeply into it because we have 100 other things to talk about today. And that was almost like one of the overwhelming things. It's like, oh my God, Noah's going to be on my podcast. What do we talk about? There could be, this could be a 3-hour long episode essentially. So, but one thing I knew that I wanted to especially let our listeners or my listeners know is just about the project. And if I don't want to, is it registrations? Like if it's still open for people to connect and what that looks like.
Yes, I'm so happy that you asked. Okay, so On Ed Mentors Connect is a place to that in phase 3. So we basically went through a phased approach. And in phase 1, where you came in, it was a collaborative inquiry. And we were like, what happens if we invite mentors to be in a space where mentees can find them, where they can choose them based on their profiles and who they are as educators and people. And from there, we've grown this community where we actually understand ourselves in a different way. And what we are doing is cultivating one-to-one self-directed mentorship experiences. So at any point throughout the year, you can apply to become a mentee. We actually need mentees. We have lots of mentors, but we need mentees because we're trying to encourage not just pre-service teachers. So it's been really cool. Mentors have been registering as mentors and as mentees. And I have registered as a mentee, and I have a few mentors from our group. And I'm so excited to change the understanding of mentorship. I went through NTIP last year, which was interesting as a seasoned professional, and I appreciated a lot of the learning. But what I saw besides that OEM Connect can complement the NTIP experience is that there is a disconnect in people's understanding of mentorship. So now when I go to do workshops for OEM Connect, I spend some upfront time doing some activities to get people thinking differently about mentors and what it means to be a mentor. And we've kind of redefined it as somebody who is really somebody who's motivational and there to empower and there to nurture and there to be open to your ideas and to be open to possibilities and to be open to really an equitable understanding of what teaching is and what learning is. And that whole reciprocity is the idea that we all have something to teach and we all have something to learn.
And I think I know that as a pre-service teacher and as a new teacher, it's such a winning approach to have a mentor that might not be all of those things, but is maybe even 2 or 3 of those things is so incredible because I don't think everyone is necessarily like me and is as like gonna go jump off the end of a cliff with a whole bunch of new crazy ideas with a certain level of confidence. And so what new teachers, pre-service teachers, and even teachers with 5-6 years experience are just looking for that, I don't want to say validation, but like you said, that openness to new ideas and then the back and forth, like working together to make it the best that it can be, right? So I know when
Yes, and I don't mean to interrupt, but like people like you are a perfect example, but all people have something. And if we only have a one-way street in mentorship, then we lose out on what can really be gleaned for all parties in that relationship. And the whole idea is that mentorship is about relationships first. And the resources that we're developing are really about how to create those foundational relationships. When you're given a mentor, you don't necessarily have choice. But when you self-direct your mentorship experiences, you not only have choice of the who, the how, and the when, but you have choice because your why is what's driving you. So if your mentor isn't working for you or they're only working in one dimension, then you can get yourself another mentor or you can switch mentors and you have say and you have agency. And that's something that's lacking a lot in our education system. And we believe that we can help to create that space for people.
I'm thinking about mentorship, like in the classroom. And do you see this mentorship being something that we could do for our students, like finding them mentors outside of us teachers, like basically being there supporting them? How can we?
It's interesting that you said that. Because Lee,
yeah.
who came on my show,
yeah,
that's how I got this whole idea for OEM Connect, is she helps you bring experts into the class. And what I'm trying to do for my students is help them find experts to mentor them in a subject area when they go into Genius Hour in a Bobified version, where they get to, under the umbrella of sustainability, choose a topic that they're passionate about. But my big goal this year is that everybody has a mentor that can speak to that issue, so that their research isn't just, two-dimensional, that they really have a four-dimensional experience with another person who can help them learn about that issue or help them make a change that they're interested in making. So I think that there are lots of different ways we can create opportunities for mentorship in the classroom.
So shameless plug for, the Digital Human Library and all of those educators, and not necessarily educators, right? It could be experts in tons of fields. They sign up on their own, so they're willing to, donate some of their time, right? That's how it works?
Yes. And the reality is, I can read to my class about, Indigenous people and talk about their stories. And I can read memoir, and the kids can talk about the memoirs that they're reading. But if I had a person, and that's what I'm trying to do as often as possible, and capitalize on that human capital and build those connections, then it really adds voice, literally and figuratively, to learning experiences. And if we take that to the content areas, it can be so profound, because you're not limiting the teacher's knowledge to that contained classroom experience. You're bridging it in a global way, and you're bridging it to be a facilitator of learning, as opposed to the keeper of all the knowledge in a space.
And I love that you said that, because as a new teacher, I think it's super overwhelming to look at your curriculum and look at everything that you need to, the knowledge that you need to pass down on your students for them to be able to go to the next grade. And for example, I'm teaching science, and I can be the first one to admit that I don't know everything in my curriculum, necessarily an expert on it. And I just thank God that the mindset in education has shifted to what you just said, that the teacher isn't necessarily the keeper of all the knowledge, because I would feel very overwhelmed and very incompetent, and just more worried about the things that I don't know than the things that I know. And I don't think that that's a good way to, necessarily enter your class every day worried about that.
Well, I went through the exact same thing. I was pregnant with my third child, my third daughter, and I was given 7 and 8 science to teach for 3 months. And I cried hysterically, thinking about my inadequacy and how was I going to teach these children things I didn't know. And I tried to learn it. And the one thing that gave me strength was creating the projects that are now called Building Outside the Blocks projects, or BOBs, but I didn't know that they were called BOBs yet. And it was the joy of learning that came from my classroom, from the students doing, a pure substances and mixtures unit, and bringing in things like perfume and their favorite MAC cosmetics and shampoo and hand sanitizer, and something as extreme as like the contents of a lethal injection, and really teaching each other, deepening each other's understanding of what the science was behind all of these products, and also deepening their understanding of the differences between pure substances and mixtures, not because I was an expert, but because we created a collaborative environment where the expertise came from the room and not from anything greater than that. And it was such a humbling experience to know, or even hear, that my kids thought I was a good science teacher because I felt inadequate really often. But it was because of this Bob that I created for them that added so much dimension and color to the learning experiences, to the point that I had a student who was baking as her pure substances and mixtures project. It was called Do You Know? Or Did You Know? And that the rule was, they would say, did you know that? And then everybody would go, wow. And then they would continue with their presentation. And so every day in a unit, when you have students coming to, enrich everybody's experience with their thinking and learning, it's a profound reality in the age of information that we don't have to know everything, but we really do have to be open to what the curriculum can offer us, and also what's beyond the curriculum. And beyond the curriculum are the whole children in your space that can add so much to what you're doing and make it meaningful and organic.
When you did that, when you kind of put that ownership on almost like the class learning as an ensemble. It wasn't going to be you giving, for example, like the Google Slides lesson and then filling in the notes on their sheets kind of thing. Was there like a resistance or a shift in their thinking? Because I feel like when I do that with my students, and when I try to transition into giving them that almost like responsibility of their own learning, they're like, oh, holy moly, okay, we're going to have to like work. We can't just memorize and then just spit it back on a test. And then they're kind of like off balance. Did you find that?
Well, I think sadly, it's still rare that students can be in the driver's seat of their learning, and they're so used to being passive participant observers
Yeah.
in their own learning that for them it's really hard. I mean, even with my grade eights last year, the first Bob that I did, and then the second one, because I did the What's in a Name, and then I did the personal playlist project. And by that time, that was the second time they had ever gotten to choose their own date for a project, and the second time that they ever had to backwards design in view of that date their work at home, and the first time that they ever had to really listen to everybody else's presentation and engage with them. So there were a lot of layers to the responsibility, but when you read the reflections at the end of each unit, and then my end of year reflections for their favorite projects and the things that matter most to them, that's where you really find out how profound a shift it is for them. And then they shift. And you hope that their other school experiences don't undo your year of doing, empowering, and leading the way for them to find and use their voices in school.
Yeah. I just, okay, sorry. This is something that I'm going through right now with my students. It's the beginning of the year. Students are getting to know a little bit, like the new students who are coming in my class, because I was very lucky and am still teaching like 10 of the same students that I had last year. And so I think they're getting back into the groove of what Madame Lalonde's classroom is like. And their other teachers don't necessarily have the same approach as Madame Lalonde. So we've been relearning how we will be learning in Madame Lalonde's class. And it's just something that I've been living very fully with them, and having those discussions about just taking responsibility of their own learning, and being proud of that, and wanting to actually learn. And when we do experiments in science, is not just for fun. Like, what can we take out of it? What questions can we ask? How can we push it even further? So lots of cool things kind of with what we're talking about is happening as a reflection of my classroom right now. So I want to kind of spin on a dime here. And when it's funny, because when I started season 3 of the podcast, I was on a phone call with you for some advice, because I was like, Noah, I don't know what to do. Essentially, I had so many ideas on where my podcast needed to go. And I think what you said was just kind of like, let it lead you, let the podcast lead you, see where it brings you, right? Does that sound familiar?
Sure, it's possible.
Yeah.
I said that. Yeah.
Well, just because I wanted to have more structure and do this and do that. And anyways, it didn't really feel like me, but moving on. Today, the podcast has led me, to speaking with you. And when I said that could have been 110 things that we talked about, I felt as though for this season, what I really and truly want to do is give my guest and I just a space for us to chat about something that they want to talk about, kind of like giving our students choice in their projects, for example. So when I messaged you on Twitter to say, hey, if you could talk about anything on the podcast, what would it be? And you were like, well, becoming the teacher I want to be. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I have been thinking about that sentence. And I have been wondering, like, making up my own ideas of what you're going to tell me and what you want to talk about and why you want to talk about this. And it's like finally the moment that I get to know. So I'm just going to like open the mics to you and let's dive into this.
It's funny because I kind of said it off the cuff. And what
Yeah.
seems to happen in my life is I say things off the cuff, and it turns out that's probably the truest truth that there is. So I had to think about it. I wasn't sure if I was going to commit to that, statement. And I was thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, that's it. One of my biggest pieces of learning in the last little while has been the role of reflection and the role of understanding your own identity in everything that you do, as a mom, as a teacher, as, a joyful, exuberant person who exists. The more I know myself, the better a job I can do in the classroom. And the more I accept myself, the better I can be at learning the things that I'm not as good at yet or don't know yet. And kind of being driven by that power of yet has given me so much hope. And, Jennifer Abrams has a book out called Swimming in the Deep End. And I really loved it. And not just because she had a shout out to the P3 in her book, which was a wonderful surprise, but she spends a lot of time talking about how we as educators need to know ourselves. We as leaders need to know ourselves. And I think that we don't spend enough time, not in school and not in life, allowing ourselves those times. But if we know ourselves and we know, the things that scare us and the things that make us feel truly vulnerable, that can really help us as educators. So becoming the teacher that I want to be is about, taking risks in ways that help me pay tribute to my strengths and that make my not yet, my weaknesses, my areas for development a little bit less scary. And I think that the more I open myself to what's possible, knowing myself on the journey, I can also have that self-care piece that I'm really working on that I don't always pay enough attention to until it's too late. So becoming the teacher that I want to be is a process with no real arrival, but lots of different accomplishments along the way. And I think that every teacher could benefit from that consideration only because it allows you points of reflection in your day, your week, your unit, your thinking overall. And when people say you're the best teacher I ever had, I find that really nice, but really a lot of pressure. Like, how will I ever be the best teacher for the next person if you got my best? And how will I maintain that? And I've been so lucky in my 24th year of teaching to say that I have been able to make really positive, long-lasting relationships with my learners over the years. And when I started in York Region, I ended up on the second day of my supply teaching in an LTO because the teacher was hurt and didn't come back for quite some time. And those students happen to be housed in my school right now because their school is being built. So out of nowhere, I had this wonderful surprise from 2 years ago where my former students who are now in grade 7 are like, Mrs. Daniel! And they were telling me like all these amazing things that happened in these 3 months that I spent in their classroom. And I have been floored by what they remember, by what they feel. And it's a good thing to think about when I'm on the road to becoming the teacher that I want to be, because I've always wanted to make an impact. And over the years, what that looks like has been teased out a little bit more clearly. And the social emotional aspects are things that I put ahead of the academics more today than ever before. So I think it's about allowing yourself to be in flux and knowing that your horizon is clear. And for me, becoming the teacher that I want to be is really reframing every year what my goals are, to look very specifically at how I can achieve them, to reflect on whether or not I have achieved them, and to find the people, the mentors who can help me get there. So sometimes it's something simple like Canva. And I said, okay, Sera, I keep hearing about Canva and you spent, 10 minutes with me and I use it all the time. So sometimes those things that make you want to not try, I'm rocking.
You're rocking
well,
it.
I secretly wanted to be in advertising. I actually didn't, but I would love to do that. I love spending time with images and words, but that helps me in my media literacy, critical thinking, and other areas. So I think that that keeping that in the back of your mind is really powerful. When you heard me say that, what did you think?
Well, my question was like, how do you make a list of, and this is just like Sarah's on her silly list there, but do you make a list of, what you want to be as a teacher and what you know that you need to work on, and you like track your progress? Like, how do you know when you quote unquote become, in big parentheses here, or in des guillemets en français, quotes. It's been a day. How do you know when you've reached the teacher you want to be? I understand that it's a process, but it just seems like if you're always in flux and you're always kind of like in reflection and in progress, is there like an endpoint?
No, you're like always being and becoming.
Yeah.
That's the job of a learner. So it's about enjoying the ride and getting messy. I'm less methodical, I think, than you in certain ways. But what I do, like this year, I am the equity lead, and it means so much to me. So I'm doing a lot of reading and I'm doing a lot of thinking about equity. But I can't really know until I meet my students what that means, because being the teacher that I want to be for one class looks really different than being the teacher I want to be for another class. And I'm learning a lot already from my students in terms of building relationships, because a lot of them have had experiences where that wasn't something valued necessarily. And I freak people out. So I had a conversation with a student yesterday about some of her learning challenges. And she's like, nobody's ever talked to me this way before. I think it's just because I get B's, so they leave me alone. And I said, well, I don't mean to call you out in a negative way. She goes, no, I'm so glad. I'm so glad, because I felt dumb and I don't think I'm dumb. And I want to talk about this some more. And to be honest with you, being and becoming the teacher you want to be is so emotional, but it's so cool. Like, if I can do that for somebody, if I can give them an avenue into themselves, if I can give them the spotlight because they need it, if I can put the spotlight away from them because they really can't handle it, then that's part of me becoming the teacher I want to be, because I want to be fluid enough to meet the needs of all of my students. And it doesn't happen in a day. I'm still an idealist after all these years, but I also know that it happens in longer chunks of time. But when it's over, when they leave me, I hope they all know that I did everything I could for every one of them while they were in my care. And that's part of it.
When did you decide or think about, okay, this is what I'm working on? Was it because you weren't the teacher that you wanted to be at some point in last year or the year before or yesterday, and you're like, well, wait, no, I need to shift my focus. I need to start really thinking about this. Like, when or how did you start having this mindset?
I think it's a complicated question. I'm not sure that there was a point where I had an epiphany and went, I'm going to go this way. I think it's always been like a reciprocal experience in class,
Yeah.
but it's also depth over breadth. So I've chosen to go deeper into myself recently, to explore myself as a learner and explore what it is that I want out of teaching. I think it's also being thrown into teaching subjects that I've never taught before, which is like earth-shattering sometimes, but really a wonderful point of growth. And
Yeah.
I feel proud and scared at the same time that I'm willing to work very hard, but I'm also struggling sometimes to deal with my own learning scars. And so accepting that has been part of all of this, to know that every person in the scenario factors into that equation. So I don't know that I have a perfect formula for anybody else. This is my formula,
Hmm.
but I really do marinate on whatever it is that I want to think about. And I revisit it as a lens to look on everything that I'm doing. So if inquiry is something I'm trying to develop, which when I was in the IB, I was really thrilled to be able to learn about that, to be able to develop conceptual understanding, to improve how I ask questions or write a statement of inquiry or plan a unit or reflect on a unit. That was a focus for a long time. Assessment was a focus for a long time, and how to really use formative assessment so that summative assessments are more equitable and really cover the totality of what it is that you set out to teach, like all those aspects.
Okay. So one thing that I think about when I think of Noa Daniel is the whole piece of reflection. And I know through On End Mentors a lot at the beginning of, the radio show that we had that we spoke about, I was a new teacher looking into how I can reflect on my practice, and I just seen you as like kind of this goddess of reflection, because we talked about it so much on air and on podcasting, but not necessarily like in my actual practicum or in, the classroom at the Faculty of Education. So all this reflection piece was new to me, and I started reflecting on being reflective. And
Mm.
I was wondering, like, for you, if this was something that you have been building, like, have you been building this reflective muscle in your head for a long time? Like when you got out of the faculty, is that something that they spoke about? Or like, when did you kind
Oh
of
my
learn, or
gosh,
how
not
did
at
you
all in
learn?
the faculty.
No?
I think it happened probably in graduate school. I was in a
Mm,
course and we had to record ourselves and transcribe a lesson and then write a reflection on that. And there was a lot of reflecting in graduate school. But it was so interesting because I started to not just listen to myself. I was listening to the voices of my learners and hearing indicators about what they were getting or fun we were having. I happened to be playing the noun game when I did that. And I'll never forget because I realized that there are so many things that I was doing that required more explanation if there was going to be an outside
Ooh,
audience, because
okay.
there's so much culture in my class that isn't in like a lesson, happens over, months and months. So reflecting through those assignments, and that one in particular, got me into a practice of reflection. And because I was at an IB school after that, so fast forward 6 years, in an IB school, reflection is absolutely essential. And the International Baccalaureate reflection, you reflect on your units before, during, and after. So embedding reflection into student assessment experiences was also something that we became really good at. And through that process, I learned a ton about, the progression of a unit and responsiveness to learners. And I learned a ton about what I was doing well and what I wasn't doing well. But, I've always been a great advocate of the take two. So reflection also gives me a chance to do better. And it was at a time when I was teaching, 2 or 3 grade 7 classes. So if I could reflect in action, which Shone used to talk about, then I could actually fix it right away. And by the
Mm,
time I wrote my reflection, I could know which class I could do what with and how I would do each of my unit planning differently, because even if my lesson was similar, it would be really catered quite differently to the people in the room. So that reflection really helped me see how to deliver a lesson or a learning experience to the group, and
hmm.
how many nuances there are in every single learning exchange that happens in a classroom.
Yeah. So when you are, let's say, like reflecting on your lesson or your unit, right? Because
Hmm.
the theme of this podcast is becoming the teacher I or you want to be. Did you
Hmm.
find that sitting down and taking that time, like, obviously was worth it? That's question one. And then question two that I had that kind of just like popped up while you were explaining that and talking about your learners. Did you ever ask them like for feedback on you to know if you were being the right teacher for them?
Yeah,
Does that make
always
sense?
to everything you
Yeah.
just asked. I'm
Like, how
still,
do you do that?
well, okay, so there are a couple answers to that. So reflecting on a unit and looking at meeting my students' needs, I know that if they're not successful, then I'm not successful. And I always
Mm,
kind of count votes in a room. So if, 80% of my students can do a task, then I think, okay, it wasn't me mostly, and it's just the 20 that I need to cater to in a different way. So I really do kind of take the pulse of my learners on a regular basis. But at the end of every single unit, my students reflect on the unit itself and how I could have taught them as individuals better. And at the end of the year, they do a teacher evaluation for me. And I value it. I value it not just because they say really nice things that sit with me for life, but when
no.
they say things that, especially during the course of the year, I can fix them. Like, I have a really interesting class this year, and I've had to slow down a lot. And I've had to reevaluate if I was forcing content or skill,
Mm,
because I really, truly was not meeting the needs of my learners. I am like a very excited person. I know I keep that hidden. So I was like, this is me. And now we're going to learn and it's going to be so much fun. And I had students who needed me to, put up an agenda in the classroom for homework as opposed to
Right.
just what we were going to do that day. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I have a Google Classroom and I send you guys reminders. Like, what more do you need? But they needed something visual in the room because there's a lot of anxiety. And if I didn't know that, if I didn't give them a point of reflection and a place to safely tell me that, they would have been worse off today. So because I was reflective and listened to them, I've changed a lot about how I've been teaching this group. And I've slowed down a lot and I've made different choices. I cut out 4 assignments that I had originally planned in view
Wow.
of deepening the assignment that I was doing and making something a formative assessment because I was seeing that they were like needing feedback in a rubric. It was really interesting. When students have never had a feedback friendly classroom before and they don't see themselves as co-creators, they're just like, please evaluate me. Please, just give me a mark and tell me where I'm at. And I just need to know and then I'll be fine. And it's really hard for me because I'm so not into marking. I mean, I don't mind marking. I'm really into continuous growth and development and reflection. So they're like, please give me a mark. It's like, okay, so here's a rubric, but this is a formative assessment. So it's not going on your report card, but I really need you to understand that I spent the time giving you numbers because you needed them. But I gave you the numbers because I needed you to deeply understand what your next steps were. So that when we get to the summative, you can make those changes and be more successful on your learning continuum. And they're like, okay, but how do I get a 4? And I was like, okay. So
Yeah.
this is like a constant, it's a battle in a good way. And because of reflection, I think I have the opportunity to see the teacher that they need me to be. And the kind of teacher I want to be is somebody that meets the needs of every student. And I'm 24 years in, I'm still a little doe-eyed. I still believe that that's possible. I just know that it's not always possible in a day. But I really, truly believe it's possible over time. And I'll go home at the end of the day and go, okay, this one didn't get it. This one totally got it.
Yeah.
This one, I'm not sure. What other things can this person show me? What other ways can I see if they're getting it? Because they're not great at communicating, but what if they draw me the picture and they don't have to speak about it? So I think it's about giving myself the chance to really look at my day in a way through the eyes of my learners and to find out as much information that I can get to do a better job for them.
Okay. So then one of the last questions I have for you then is through this whole idea of becoming the teacher that you want to be, that's not something that, well, maybe you can achieve it this year with the students that you have. But if I understand what you're kind of like telling me, it's that teacher that you need to be is obviously going to change with every
Oh my
class,
gosh,
with every student, with
every class, with every day. Yeah, but it's kind of about being on that journey,
yeah.
and it's a very hard thing in teaching. It is to be like, yeah, this doesn't end. Even though it's my 24th year, I just finished my first contract year in the board. And I got this card to say, congratulations on your first year in the board. And then I got this certification that I finished NTIP. And I have feelings about it, to be honest. And part of my feeling was, it didn't say, congratulations, you've just begun a career of journeying. It said, you finished something.
Ooh.
And I felt like it could have been worded a little differently to say that there is no end, right? That we don't really finish anything. We go deeper, we go broader, but we're always growing and we're always being and becoming. And if we're not, that's where the real challenges come in terms of our learners. Then we're just teaching at people and we're not teaching people. And I think that that's where that constant evolution comes from. So for me, becoming the teacher that I want to be is a minute to minute, day by day, month by month, year by year kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
that's so fair.
Yeah, it's like the learning stance I need.
Yeah. Okay. Then to wrap up this podcast, can I ask you today, whatever teacher that you were today, or maybe, wait, we're Monday today. So today or even last week. What are 3 words that kind of summarize the teacher that you are like right now for your students, for the classes and the learners that you have in front of you? I know it's a hard one.
Well, I mean, for sure, still enthusiastic. Like just so
Yeah.
that has not changed.
Yeah.
Maybe flexible,
Nice. Ooh,
which I think is important. But flexible, maybe responsive is better than flexible. So I don't know. And then, yeah, I'd like to say responsive. And I hope to be nurturing. Whether it's nurturing critical thinking skills, or it's nurturing different kinds of literacies, or it's nurturing in a social emotional way. I love to mama bear with my students and really fiercely advocate for them. So yeah, I think I could live with those 3.
Noa Daniel, enthusiastic, responsive, and a nurturing teacher. Makes my heart just burst. Well, I want to take the time to thank you for speaking with me. And like, we get it, right? As educators, our time and our energy are our most valuable resources. And as you mentioned, we give what we can and we do what we can. And for the rest, que sera, sera. Que Sera Sera is a proud member of the Voice Ed Radio Network. Original music, editing, and production of this podcast is done by the talented Mathieu Leroux. Find my podcast on all podcast platforms, including SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and now newly on YouTube. Talk to you soon.